하나님 아버지 감사합니다. 오늘 자일스트라 강사님을 우리에게 허락하셔서 이렇게 어, 소셜 미디어와 또 게임에 대해서 우리가 살아가는 스크린 문화 속에서 우리가 어떤 분별력을 가지고 살아가야 할지 우리로 하여금 생각하게 하시고 정말 중요한 지혜들을 얻는 시간이 되게 해 주시옵소서. 강의하시는 우리 세라 강사님께 주님께서 성령의 충만함을 더해 주시고 함께 강의 듣는 이 시간 속에 우리 성도님들에게 큰 유익과 또 이전과는 다른 삶의 시작이 있을 수 있도록 축복하여 주시옵소서. 예수님의 이름으로 기도합니다. 아멘. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I pray for your fullness of Holy Spirit and let this time be beneficial to our uh, congregation. Yeah. Now you may begin.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone who is on this Zoom call. It is so nice to be with you today. As you may have heard from Sam, my name is Sarah Zailstra, and I write for the Gospel Coalition. As part of that work, I have spent the last couple of years researching, writing, and podcasting on how Christians can think about using social media and video games well. I am so excited to share some of that with you today, and I have a lot to say, so let's get started. As we do, it is important to keep in mind how young this technology is. Facebook opened up in 2006, only 17 years ago. Smartphones came along in 2007, only 16 years ago. These are not old and time-tested technologies. We are the first generations to have to wrestle with how to use them well. We are going to organize our time today around these 3 questions that you can see on the screen. The first is, how did we get here? The second is, how much should we care? How much can we relax about, and how much do we have to worry about, in other words? And the third one is, what can we do about it? As we move through each major question, I'm going to address social media first and then video games, and so we'll switch back and forth between them as we go along. Our first question is, how did we get here? So I got my first social media account in 2007. I can remember filling in my information and occasionally updating my status. But while it was fun, I didn't spend a lot of time there. That changed as time went on, and that's because Facebook changed as time went on. So I'm going to tell you what happened over time. Facebook's first major change was the news feed. Before that, you had to go to each friend's page to see what they were up to. So I would go onto Facebook and I would check Sam's page, and I would check Mike's page, and I would check Jennifer's page. And then when I ran out of people that I could think of, I would just get bored and log off. Well, in September of 2006, Facebook, for the first time, began collecting all of your friends' updates and posting them in a continually updating list. They did it to make the process of seeing what your friends were doing a lot easier. Well, this changed social media in 2 substantial ways. First, you didn't have to go looking for content, it was coming to you. It would be like if you were watching television and instead of having to get up and go to the kitchen to get a snack, your mom started just bringing snacks to you all the time. Second, before you were posting for the friends who would come and look for you. So you were in a public space, but you were kind of private there. Now, Facebook was pushing out your posts to all of your friends, everybody you ever went to middle school with or went to camp with. So your posts were less private and more public. From Facebook's point of view, this was enormously successful. Immediately, people began using Facebook twice as much as they had been before. And social media platforms ever since have been using some version of it. The second major change was the like button. In 2009, Facebook staff noticed a lot of comments were very small. They would say things like, great, or I'm glad to hear it, or that's nice. And so in order to clear those out and make way in the comment section for more substantial conversation, Facebook staff thought, what if we just had a like button, and if you like it, you can just push like and move on. Well, inadvertently, they were also creating a gambling problem. We get a dopamine hit every time we see another like, and we're never sure when someone is going to hit like, which means we have to keep checking back over and over and over again. I bet you never post on social media and then can walk away for a day. We have to go back and see, did somebody like it? Did somebody like it now? Did somebody like it now? That is the same psychology that is used by slot machines in casinos, that uncertainty of a reward. The like button also began assigning grades to your social life. You could see which one of your posts were doing better than other posts, and you could also see whether your posts were doing better or worse than your friends' posts. So likes began ranking the success of every social interaction you had. And then in 2010, 4 months after the release of the iPhone 4, which was the first with a front-facing camera, Instagram showed up. Now you could easily take photos, edit them with filters, and share them. This moved social media from primarily a verbal game, from being about words, to primarily a picture game. Now it's about images. And what that did was up the emotional connection. So I can tell you about sweet puppies all day long, but if I show them to you, but you won't feel anything. If I just tell them to you, you're not going to feel anything. But if I show them to you, if I show you this puppy, you'll think, oh, isn't he so cute? There's a difference. You feel something in you and you want to feel that again. And so you'll keep coming back. What it also did was to open the door for advertisers. Here's what they knew. The human brain processes images a lot faster than text. You can identify the Hyundai or the KB logo in 1/10 of a second. Images also hang around in our brains a lot faster, or a lot longer, than words do. So before, if you wanted to sell something, you had to buy an advertisement in a newspaper or a TV or a billboard or somewhere. You just tried to buy an advertisement and get in front of your buyers. Now you could distribute images online, and you could do it through audiences that had already been curated and built up for you. So for example, if you wanted to sell jewelry, you could say to Facebook, I want to show my ad to women between the ages of 15 and 35 who live near Seoul and who like the Infinite Challenge show. Also, if you were a regular person who was getting really good grades on your social interactions, advertisers began to ask you if you would sell things for them. So you would wear a t-shirt or something and then put a link and say in your comment section, like, hey, link to, I'm wearing this great t-shirt. I love it so much. You want one too. Why don't you go get one from this store? So that meant that the people who were getting really good grades began to create posts, not to talk to their friends and family, but so that they could get more and more followers, so they could make more and more money from those links. And that meant that the rest of us, the people who were not getting the top grades in social media, were less and less likely to go online to connect with friends and family, and more likely to be in somebody's audience. You were more likely to follow someone that you didn't know in real life. The next evolution of social media was short videos. So TikTok does to pictures what pictures do to written post. Makes it easier to consume, more emotional, more memorable, easier to reach a wider audience. You can get your message across in a different way. Another thing that TikTok is very good at is algorithms. So algorithms pay attention to what we click on, how long we spend somewhere, where we spend money, even how long we pause when we're scrolling through. The point is to feed us more and more of what we want. Well, the problem is it feeds us more and more of what we want. So if the news feed is like your mom constantly bringing you snacks, the algorithm is bringing you your favorite snacks and putting them in your mouth for you. It takes away any time you might have to decide against having another snack. You don't have any time to think, no, thank you. It's already in your mouth. With each new change, social media became more economic and more engaging. This is not an accident, and it is working great. More than 90% of Koreans are on social media, both on Korean and American apps, and they spend an average of 1 hour and 11 minutes a day there. Now, those numbers are for adults. And I think we can safely assume that our kids, our teenagers, are spending even more time there. Okay, so that's taken us through social media. Let's talk a little bit about video games. How did we get to where we are with our video games? The more I learned about social media, the more it actually reminded me of video games. In both, you create an online identity in an online world. In both, there are influencers, and sometimes you go online just to watch those people perform. In both, you can connect with people all over the globe. And in both, you are ranked, and you can tell if you're doing better or worse than the other people. There have been a lot of changes in video games over the last 25 years. When my husband was in high school, he had to physically be with his friends in the living room next to a game console to play something like Mario Kart. That's very different now. One way that games have changed is the content. Clearly, over time, that has become more sophisticated, even beautiful. It's far more engaging than it was before. The open world games, especially, are always changing. They're always new and interesting. It's also more realistic. The graphics and the sound effects are more lifelike. And there's more of it. 25 years ago, you bought what was on the store shelf and you just played that over and over and over again until you got tired of it. Now there are so many choices, you could never play your way through everything. Another change is the availability of gaming. These days, we can play anytime, anywhere, with nearly anyone. Our kids can play after school, or they can play during school. They can play at night before they go to bed, and they can play at night when they're supposed to be in bed. They can play in the car, at school, in their bedrooms. They don't need to be near a television or a console. And they can play with anyone in the world, which means there is always someone awake and available to play. They can easily play with people they've never met, people that you even will never meet in real life, and that is definitely a change. Another change is economic. It used to be that video game companies made money when they sold you a game. But now, most of their money, by which I mean 90%, comes from what is called in-app purchases or microtransactions. That's when you can buy something really small, say a specific weapon or an extra life, to make the game more enjoyable or to help you progress. Now, only a minority of gamers are spending all that money. But it is affecting you even if you never spend a penny on an in-app purchase. Because the economic incentive has changed. Today, game designers don't care if you buy their game or not. In fact, they'll give it to you for free. What they want you to do is to spend a really, really long time there so that those who are willing to spend money have more time to make more purchases. To do this, video game companies have hired psychologists or people who have graduate degrees in studying the human brain and addiction. Here's what they've learned. If people can finish a level, they'll feel happy and they'll keep playing. People also respond when you track streaks, like, hey, you've played every day for 8 days, and you give them a reward. People respond if you use triumphant sound effects, if it sounds like they're winning. People respond if you ask them to log in at a certain time. So if you say, hey, at 4 o'clock on Thursday, this monster will come to life, or these supplies will be available, so you better be there then. People respond to that. People also respond well to leaderboards, but game designers have to be careful with them because if you put too many people on a leaderboard, the people toward the bottom will get discouraged and quit. So you will notice that leaderboards never get too big. I listened to one game designer explain that after players complete a building or a task, they saw a drop off in activity as the players took a break. So what he did was to design a game that has several projects going at the same time. So when you finish one task, you're only halfway through another one and you can turn your attention to that. And then he has you start another one so that there's never a time when you've completed things. It worked. He said the drop off in activity disappeared when they switched to this model. And when I was listening to him, he was teaching it to other game designers. Now, none of these strategies are necessarily bad or evil, but they are being deployed on purpose because there is a strong economic incentive to keep players playing. So no wonder then that by 2021, the average South Korean teenager was spending 23 hours a week playing video games. Okay, so that's where we are. My next question is, how much should we care, especially as Christians? Now, we know that if we did anything for as long as our kids look at social media and video games, if we played baseball, if we practiced music, if we read our Bibles, we would be different people because what we do shapes us. For that fact alone, it is important that we spend time thinking about this. Colossians 4:5 and Ephesians 5:16 tell us to make the best use of our time and to look carefully how you walk. So let's swing back to social media. How can we look carefully at how we walk there? Now, I confess I did not do my own thinking here. I am pulling from Jen Wilkins' chapter in Social Sanity for an Insta World because it's so good. Here's what she said. God is social, and he created us to be social. He created flocks of birds, herds of elephants, even networks of tree roots. God said to Adam, "It is not good for you to be alone." God communicates with himself, the Trinity. He communicates with us through Bible reading, which is him talking to us, and through prayer, us talking to him. We communicate with each other. On our best days, we are enjoying God's world together and rubbing up against each other, helping to shape each other into the image bearers that we were meant to be. And on its best day, social media is a powerful way that people are drawn together across space in a way we could never do before. In its most beautiful form, social media encourages and delights and connects. It can draw us into prayer for each other. It can cause us to worship and give thanks to God when we see someone announce a pregnancy or come to the Lord or even bring order to a messy closet. But there are a few ways that social media draws us to rival God instead of to worship him. Social media promises us that we can be the influencer, the one that people want to be like, the example of goodness, truth, and beauty. And while we can learn a lot from each other, seeking to be an influencer is a dangerous thing to do. That is for God alone. Because we know that we're sinful, right? Anyone who's a parent and has watched their child imitate something they've done and thought, oh no, don't copy me, right? We don't really want people to copy us. We're full of sin. And we also know that we're changeable. We cannot see all of the world's goodness and evil, temptations and triumphs and be unchanged. We're malleable, which means that we have to be careful what we look at, and people have to be careful when they look at us. God is the only one who is unchangeable, who is always perfectly good. Social media can also promise us limitlessness, that we could see everything, know everything, be friends with everyone. But you know we are limited. We really cannot be everywhere at once, know everything at once, be friends with everybody we ever run across. In some ways, social media promises us omniscience and omnipotence, and that is a false promise. And we know it's false because it only leads to feelings of anxiety and overwhelm and depression and fear. It does not lead to peace or rest. Looking at those notifications does not make us feel peaceful. And I'll also add this. I don't know if you've noticed this. When I was in high school and I have pictures of myself from high school, I'm almost none of them are me by myself. I'm almost always in a picture with my friends. But if you scroll through a young girl's Instagram or social media page today, I am noticing more and more girls are taking their pictures alone. More and more, if you scroll through their feed, it's just pictures of them by themselves over and over and over again. And that leads me into a couple more concerns I have, especially for our kids. For girls, it's comparison. And this was a problem before. It's comparison among girls has always been a problem. But now that's the first thing that girls tell me about when I ask how they feel about social media. Social media heightens a girl's self-consciousness about her body. It counts her friends and puts that on public display. And it contrasts how she's using her time with the most fun thing that her friends are doing at that moment in time. She can never win. The results of that are measurable. In the last 10 years, self-poisonings among 10 to 12-year-old girls in the United States quadrupled. Hospital admissions for self-harm tripled among 10 to 14-year-old girls. Major depressive episodes among 12 to 17-year-old girls increased by 52%. Emergency room visits for suicidal ideations and attempts nearly doubled among children and adolescents. And suicide among 10 to 14-year-old girls doubled. That's when kids started walking around with smartphones, is when that jump took place. This is especially true for girls, especially girls who use Instagram, because Instagram is so heavy with pictures, and those pictures, remember, grab our emotions and hang around in our memories. For boys, my concern is pornography. Of teens who found porn accidentally, 18% of them found it on social media. You may have porn blocking software on your devices, but if your son has access to Instagram, he is looking at the bodies of girls, and they might be girls in his school or in his church youth group. And those girls might even think they're dressing conservatively. They tell me that they're dressing conservatively, and they are if you compare them to girls who are not saved. But I have looked at their pictures, and they are not as conservative as they think they are. I know youth pastors who tell me they have to stay off because of the pictures that their youth group girls are putting up of themselves. For both boys and girls, I am concerned about shrinking attention spans. 10 years ago, the average attention span of a person was 12 minutes. Today, it's 5 minutes. Television commercials, which used to be a minute long, at least over by us, were down to 30 seconds, and now a lot of them are just 15 seconds long. You can probably feel it yourself. Maybe you used to be able to sit down and read for an hour, and now it's only a few minutes before you're reaching for your phone. This effect is even more apparent on developing brains. Kids 5 or younger who have 2 or more hours of daily screen time are 8 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. And you can see how those diagnoses began to rise along with our access to screens. We don't have time to touch on the other social media problems: bullying, hiding from adults in multiple accounts, interactions with ideas and movements too mature for our kids or that are simply wrong, but you know that they're there. And your kids know this too. If you look down where it says social media, only a third of 13 to 18-year-olds said they liked social media a lot. For those under 13, so the light green there is 8 to 12-year-olds, only 12% said they liked it a lot. Okay, so we have a good thing. God created us to be social, and we have social networks, but we also can see sin all over the place. We can see the same thing, goodness and sin, in video games. At their root, video games are about playing, and that is a good thing. It is clear that God meant us to play. Playing is a gift that brings joy, connects people, and takes us out of ourselves. A girl with a dollhouse or a boy in a creek is in a different world. C.S. Lewis calls play a pointer to something other and outer. So, what is it pointing to? Well, play can point us to eternity, to heaven. Certainly, it sparks in us a longing for another world, something more, something better. And we can easily see that in video games. People playing their longing for a different world, something better. But play also teaches us how to live here and now. Play is one of the first things we look for in human development. Children play to practice adult roles, to develop physical, emotional, and social abilities, and to discover their own talents and interests. We can certainly see that in video games, where kids play at building, at farming, and at fighting. So how does this go wrong? Right? A good thing, how does it go wrong? Let me suggest a couple of ways this could go wrong. The first and most obvious place to start is with the content of our play. If what we're playing at is wrong, by which I mean sinful, that is a problem. If your son was outside torturing small animals for fun, you would know, hey, that's wrong. If he is in a video game watching pornography in a virtual strip club, that's wrong. I would also argue that gratuitous violence is also wrong. Now, the way we play can also be wrong. So, for example, if our kids are bullying others, cheating, or lying in their games, then that's wrong. Studies also show that those who play games that demean women find it easier to demean women in real life. You could probably guess from that if your avatar is deceitful or arrogant or complaining or violent, then your real life character is experiencing those things and being shaped by them. Philippians 4:8 tells us to fill our minds with things that are true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. That's because what we think about shapes what we love, and that truth does not change for our kids just because they're looking at a virtual world. The second way our play goes wrong is that it turns into an obsession. And I want to be clear, this can happen for any kind of play, playing a sport, playing a game, even reading books for fun. But there is something unique about our screen entertainment, which includes watching YouTube videos and scrolling social media, as well as video games. There's something unique about that. Here's what it is. You are physically able to do those things for a really long time. If you played sports for hours, eventually your body would collapse. If you read a book for like 8 hours, eventually you would fall asleep. If you eat a great meal for hours, eventually you're going to have to quit or be sick. But with screens, you're not actually moving your body, so it doesn't take a lot of physical energy. In addition, the blue light from the screens tricks your brain into thinking that you're not tired. And if this is true for you as an adult, studies show it's even more true for kids. They feel even less tired than we do when they're on a screen. Also, video games are always changing. Your backyard is always the same, but video games provide all kinds of interesting places to explore and people to talk to. They are built on the quest for novelty or the search for new and different experiences. So then, our capability of losing ourselves in screens is unprecedented, especially for boys. Here's what's interesting. The same percent of boys and girls play video games, but those who report addiction are overwhelmingly male. A Stanford study shows that when males conquer territory in a video game, the parts of their brains associated with reward and pleasure light up with dopamine. The female brain lights up too, but not nearly as much. Another study showed that males feel better about wins and they don't feel as badly about losses as girls do. So their incentive is to keep reaching for those wins, and they are not discouraged or deterred by losses. It is no surprise then that a sizable minority, some say up to 20% of males, really struggle to put the games down, especially in their younger years when their brains are still developing. The executive control center, which weighs risks and rewards, is not fully mature until around the age of 25. And that means kids and teens are more likely to favor the immediate gratification of a game than the delayed gratification of going for a run or finishing a paper. And studies bear this out. In 2019, for the first time, the World Health Organization identified gaming disorder as a health condition. They described it in part as the escalation of gaming over negative consequences. In other words, even though you're failing the class or losing the job or alienating your family, you still keep playing. If this continues for at least a year, the WHO said, then you've got a gaming disorder. Now that's a problem, and not just for the hours lost in front of a screen. When boys choose games over and over, they're reinforcing neural pathways in their brains. They are learning how to respond rapidly to large amounts of incoming information, which is good training if you want to be an air traffic controller. But it is not great training for boys who need to practice focusing their attention on a single purpose, like reading a textbook, focusing on a task, or listening to a teacher. And it's not great for learning off-screen skills like navigating face-to-face conversations, finishing a boring job, or even shooting a ball into a basketball hoop. While video games do hone digital hand-eye coordination, that does not translate off screen. In other words, playing video games does not help you catch a ball or spot a moving target in real life. The evidence is a little trickier when it comes to offline friendships. We know men are losing in this area. In 1990, just 3% of American men reported they had no close friends. 3%. Last year, that jumped to 15%. For men under 30, our kids, it was 28% had no close friends. This is smack in the middle of the average ages of adult video game players, which is 18 to 34. It's those guys. Something is happening here, and we would be crazy not to at least consider the social change from Mario Kart in the living room with friends to gaming alone in a bedroom or a basement, even if you're doing it with other boys alone in their bedrooms and basements. When I looked into the studies of video games and loneliness, they show that the motive for playing matters. So if you play to be with friends, then video games don't make you feel lonely. But if you're playing to escape from hard real-life circumstances, you do feel more isolated, and you're also more likely to become addicted. So then it makes sense that boys who are fine in high school can really struggle with gaming when they get out on their own or go to college, which are hard and scary things to do. Social anxiety can push a gamer to spend more time online, which in turn heightens his real-life social anxiety. He gets stuck in a cycle. There is a lot more we could say here about interactions with strangers, about the exposure to aggressive behavior, about pornography, which gets past your porn filters if it's in a game, and about alternative sexualities. We could talk about the habits that may last to adulthood and affect work and family life. Just like with social media, we have a good thing, playing games, and we also have sin all over the place. So what are we supposed to do? Well, the very first question that we can ask ourselves is, what should our kids' social lives look like? I'm going to try and offer an answer to that. I want my kids to have a lot of friends, really good, deep friends, and I bet you do too. I want my kids to run around with other kids who share their faith, iron sharpening iron, who encourage them to love Jesus more. Eventually, we want our kids to run around with kids who aren't Christians so they can share their faith and perhaps lead some of the lost to the Lord. With their friends, we want our kids to have deep talks and lots of laughing and adventures together. We want our kids to know themselves better by getting to know someone else. We want them to have friendships built on foundations so solid they last decades. I want my kids' friends to be there when they graduate from high school and when they go to college and when they get married and when they have kids. We want those friendships to glorify God and to grow the fruit of the Spirit in our kids. We want them to anchor our kids in community, to support them when things are bad, and to amplify their celebrations when things are good. So if that's what I want my kids' social lives to look like, what should their playing look like? What should our kids' playing look like? When our kids play, we want them to experience wonder and delight at the way God made the world. We want them to be astonished, to be surprised at discovering something new about themselves or about God or about the way things work. Play should engage both their minds and their bodies. We want our kids to think through, how do I get up into that tree? How can I mix these paints together to get just the right color? How can I invent a story that I can act out? Play should be both creative and challenging. Play should also be really fun. We want our kids to laugh when they play, to relax, to set down any stress that they're carrying. Play should take our kids into a different headspace, one where they don't have to worry about homework deadlines or relationship drama. Play should be a break from work, even a child's work of growing and learning. We want our kids to play in relationship with a variety of friends. We want them to play as a way to build good and healthy connections and as a way to serve each other. But we also want them to be able to play alone as a way to rest from interaction. We want them to be able to go for a bike ride by themselves, to read a novel while lying on their bed, or to be quiet while they build something out of clay. So much creativity stems from taking time to be quiet with our own thoughts. At the end of play, we want our kids to emerge feeling rested, rejuvenated, and ready for what comes next. So if that's, or something like that, is what we're aiming at, then the next question we have to ask is, where does social media and video games fit into that picture? And as you ask this, you have to remember your basic economics. There is always an opportunity cost. So you have limited time and energy, and when you give it to one thing, you cannot give it to another. So your question has to be, what is the best use of our time and energy right now? Which might lead you to ask, is it ever social media and video games? I'm going to share my story with you. About a year and a half ago, I got off of social media. I couldn't get it to work right. Even if I tried to log on with a generous and gracious spirit, I would feel impatient and bored with the other people's posts. The ones that were interesting did not leave me feeling the fruits of the Spirit, but rather anger and frustration that led me to an ill informed judgment of that person. I was judging them. When I would log off for the day, I was never kinder or smarter or more in love with the Lord than I had been before. So I got rid of everything. Because I struggled with it, I got rid of everything: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Since I have gotten off 18 months ago, I have had more time and more energy. I have been able to think more clearly, organize myself more effectively, and do a noticeably better job at home and at work. I have been more sensitive to the Holy Spirit. I have been able to read the Bible and other books without getting bored. I pay more attention to my family and I enjoy them more. My persistent low-level anxiety has disappeared. I am more relaxed and more patient. I am far more intentional with my choices, and not once have I prioritized what would look good on social media over what is actually good. So for me personally, social media was never the right answer to what's the best thing I could be doing right now. And that experiment gave me the courage to try another one. I have a son whose friends like to play video games, and they would talk about them at school, and he wanted to be able to play and talk about them too. So my husband and I let him. We tried to be really careful about what games he played and where he played them and how long he was allowed to do that. But it was impossible not to notice, so we noticed that when he was playing, he was easily frustrated. When he wasn't playing, he was thinking and talking a lot about what he was going to play next. When we told him to turn off the game, he complained, and if he could, he disobeyed. During and after his play, he was never more patient, kind, or joyful. He looked like me when I was on social media. So we tried tightening the rules. We let him play even less, but it didn't make a difference. So we turned them off. We turned off his games altogether. My child just went through his entire 8th grade year of school and is beginning his freshman year in high school without a single minute of video games in our home. For this kid, that was the right move. For the first couple weeks, he asked when he could play games again. But after a while, that faded. And I would say for about a year now, he has not shown any interest at all. He still has friends. In fact, he's a more confident person to be friends with. Because over the last year, our son has built his own go-kart with wood and with wheels. If you're on a hill, he can kind of go down a hill on it. We got him a bow and arrow, and he shoots targets in our backyard. He rollerblades and runs and reads. He's more interesting to talk to, and he's more interested in conversation. Spiritually, we've noticed he's more eager to help us around the house. He'll empty the dishwasher or set the table. His spirit seems less stressed, more joyful, and more patient. This one change made a difference in our entire household. Now, I'm not telling you this so that you'll throw away all your kids' social media or video games. That might not be the right choice for you. But I do want to encourage you to pay attention, because that's how you'll know if your kids should be online or not. If your child is not growing in the fruits of the Spirit when they're on their screens or immediately afterward, in fact, if your child is exhibiting not fruits or anti-fruits of the Spirit, it is time to consider a break. And if the break goes well, it's worth considering if it should be extended. Now, I do honestly think that if it's well managed, some kids can play some games and some kids can handle some social media. So if your child is one of those kids and you can see clear benefits from their social media or video games, then I have a few more questions that you can ask. The first question you can ask is, what is our purpose for doing this? And I would suggest that you write it down. Write down what it is. It could be that you are doing it to evangelize others. Maybe you're doing it to build friendships. Maybe you're doing it to glorify God as a light, just be a light as a clearly Christian presence online. If you don't know why you're doing something, it's going to be hard to tell if you're doing a good job. So that's the first question. The second one is, if we get off track, how can we get back on track, right? And we're sinful, so of course we're going to get off track. Accountability is a gift we can give our kids. Children who are trapped in secret sins or addiction are terribly lonely and full of despair. Keep your kids from that. A teenager who knows their parent is going to look over their shoulder and check their chat history is able to exercise greater self-control. I would suggest that you move your kids' screens from their bedrooms to the living room. You might want to research social media platforms and games before you allow access to them. Know your kids' passwords and use them. Be for them an image of God the Father who sees them, knows them, loves them, pursues them, and is never content to allow an area of their lives to be kept separate and secret. As you do, be alert to problems and address them sooner rather than later. The third question I have here is, what type of example am I, the parent, setting? A Chicago pastor recently said that children who are surrounded by parents with a smartphone addiction will suffer the tech equivalent of secondhand smoke. Being in a house with a parent who's constantly looking at their device is just as harmful to children. So be willing to examine yourself, to respect limits, and to listen when your kids point out your own failings. Ask God to help you do better. And show them what it looks like to wrestle yourself into a healthy, God-honoring relationship with technology. Don't give up. Keep working on it. Oh, I know I laid a lot on you today. This is pretty heavy and it's hard. It's hard. You do not have to go home and throw your screens in the garbage. Start small. Maybe just say a prayer and ask a question with your family about what you want your screen time to look like. And as you do, remember God's grace is big. We can't do this on our own, and we don't have to. Romans 8:18 assures us he uses even our stumblings and mistakes for good. God is not powerless in a virtual world. He is sovereign over everything. And Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 tells us he generously gives us wisdom and guidance when we ask. So all we have to do is to ask. Thank you so much. Sam, how do you want to do the questions?
First of all, thank you for this precious lecture. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me do it. I hope it was a little bit helpful. Feels like a lot.
Yeah, personally, after I read the social sanity in an Insta world, it's much more plenty of content. Like you add the content about the video games and more specifics about uh, those information on information and data about the male and female effects. All right. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you can make a reply.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah. Let me begin by this number one. Yeah. This is the questions we already collected
Okay.
before the lecture. And
Okay.
this is the question number one. When I ask my child to run errands or call him, he does not answer or run errands while he's playing a game. I mean, the smartphone game or video game. He doesn't even come to eat. He says, I will do it after the game is over. Please wait. I will go eat after the game. At first, I told him to come eat because we eat together. But my child and I fight so much that now I either wait for him or we eat on our own first, and he comes after he finishes playing the game. He never compromises during the game. He says we should eat together when we get together, but he makes no concessions when it comes to games. What should I do? I believe a lot of parents in our days have similar uh, question like this. How do you reply?
I think it depends how old your kid is. So, like if you just have small children or toddlers, you can just take something away from them, right? Like you don't have to talk with them a lot. You can just say, no, we're not doing that. But it sounds like his or this child is a little bit older, probably. Um, and so I think the older your kid is, the slower you have to go and the more you have to talk with them about it. Um, I would I would not give up.
Mhm.
I would try to start reining it in. I would, as much as I could, say, "Hey, we're going to try and put some limits on this. Say these are the hours you can play," and then I would stick to it. And if he went over them or disobeyed or wouldn't come, I would start dishing up consequences for it. I would say, then you're not allowed to play tomorrow or whatever it might be.
Mm.
Um, One thing that's important to remember is that when you take something away, it's like, okay, it's like if you quit smoking, like then your child is gonna have a craving for it. So you
Mm.
have to supply something else, like a nicotine patch, except not a nicotine patch. I would say, hey, put down your game, we're gonna go to the theater, or put down your game, we're all going for a bike ride, or put down your game, we're gonna go to the store and buy some um, parts and we're going to make something together.
So,
Or
so you said they need alternative.
yes,
Okay,
that's what I
yeah,
would give them. Give
yeah,
them real life instead
real
and
life.
just keep giving. It's like you're taking away candy
Hmm.
and you got to give them something good instead.
Hmm.
So just keep giving them good stuff.
Okay, I got you. Right, it depends on how old the child is. Yeah, I think it is
Yeah.
also, yeah, also important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to number two. Uh, at what age is a good idea to allow children to use a smartphone?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Mm.
Um, we let my oldest have one when he was 13,
Mhm.
and I think that was too soon even then.
Uh,
I mean, he's in college now and he's looking at his phone all the time.
so
Um,
you might say as late as possible.
yes, that's what I
Uh-huh.
would say. As
Uh-huh.
long as you can go, I talked to one psychologist who said, um, the longer you can hold off, the better chance your child has of not being addicted.
Uh-huh.
So every month you can hold off, every year you can hold off
Mhm.
is better. So the longer you can go, the better off you are.
Uh, relate some related to this question. I re, re, I know some parents who are giving their children the you might say not smartphone but just a phone like the two generation second generation phone, and then they can just text and then make a phone call. And how do you think about that?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's not that exciting to call your mom.
Okay, I got you. So number three, children are exposed to smartphones from a very young age. So is there anything they can use in a better way than games, than playing games? I mean, it's a more positive way for them to use.
Yeah.
Are there any
Yeah.
suggestions?
You know what? Well, another thing I don't mind on phones is like listening to music or
Mm-hmm,
hearing an audiobook or something or even
mm-hmm,
a podcast. I think there are good ways that you can use a phone.
mm-hmm,
But I think it from the parent, it takes you to pay attention.
mm-hmm,
So what's on your kid's phone is really important. And so to just say, hey, here's your phone. Here's the apps you can have. And maybe I don't give you access to the internet.
mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there are good ways you can use a phone.
Okay. Related to this question, yeah, as you said in your book and this lecture, that boys and girls uh they're experiencing the social media or playing when they playing games, uh their brain consequences are totally different.
Yep.
So uh, can we can we replace with real world experiences uh, uh, to them when we try to replace their experience with a real world experiences, how should I how should we treat our boys and girls, and uh, do you have any recommendation for specific activities?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that video games, as I talked about, really affect boys differently. But also social media. Remember when I showed that chart of all
Mhm.
those kids who were committing suicide more often? Those were girls.
Uh-huh.
So that's all. Boys are like, social media doesn't make them depressed and anxious the way that it does girls. So
Hmm.
know that your girls are being affected by social media a lot more than your boys are.
Hmm.
Um, that it's just God made us like that. I don't know. That's just the way that it is. I would say, as you're thinking about good replacement activities for your kids, pay attention to what they're interested in and then be willing to spend money.
Hmm.
Be willing to spend money, be willing to spend time.
Hmm.
You're going to have to, I mean, why parents like screens is because it keeps our children quiet and we can focus on other things, right? We can just say,
Ah.
like, oh, you can just do your thing. So if you don't like that and want to change it, then you are going to have to give them some of your time, your
Mhm.
energy, and your money. You're going to have to buy for them if you go to the store and buy a craft for them to do or ingredients for them to make some food, or we're all going to go out this weekend and go shopping or something, like that's going to cost you something. So I just like be aware as you're going into this that making this change isn't free for you. It's gonna cost you something. And then I would just pay attention to what your kids like to do. And I would not give up because at first they're just going to want to be back on their screen, back on their screen, back on their screen. And you're going to have to keep pulling them off and pulling them off and pulling them off. It's
Mhm.
going to be the hardest at the beginning.
Mhm.
And then gradually, as they get used to it, it will get less and less hard.
Yeah, so uh, let me summarize. First, find their interest, and secondly, you need to cultivate the sound habits and sound activities, what they're interested in, and you need to spend money, time, and effort, definitely, to make them less addictive to the smartphones or screens and video games or social media. All right, thank you. Uh, let's go to number four. If you have any experience, please tell me what the criteria are for determining smartphone or game addiction and how to cure it.
Yeah. The only wisdom I have here comes from the WHO, which says it's a problem when it starts affecting your everyday life. So if your
Mm,
kid doesn't do his homework, if he doesn't come to dinner, if he doesn't play games with the or participate with the family in things, if he's a little bit older and he's missing work, um, if he's missing sleep, if he's one study showed that a quarter of gamers miss showers if he's not showering, then there's then I don't know that I would go all the way to like, oh no, he's addicted, but I would say, oh, it's time to change something.
mhm. Okay. Uh, I think it is uh just today I read the book Social Sanity in an Insta World, and then I uh quoted a few parts from your book, and I think it is really helpful. Uh, can I read a few sentences? When you are feeling emotional after about on Facebook, let me suggest this. Dig a little to find out where those feelings are coming from. Share them with the Lord. I really like this part, this expression. Sometimes we feel jealousy to someone, and we feel really in a sinful way. As a man, we know that as you mentioned, the for girls, the relationships, and then the isolation, those kind of relational things matter, but we are more like addicted to the very sexual immorality, and some kind of uh, violence or arrogant attitude, those kind of things. Uh, I I think we need to share those kind of feelings with the Lord,
Yeah.
and then preach the gospel to our heart. I think we parents, we can help them to share their feelings with the Lord.
Yeah, I agree. That's really good.
Mhm.
I just was reading something from a gamer who said one thing that helped him was he was like in college, some of his friends said to him, when you have sinful thoughts, like try and trace that back. There's often a trigger somewhere. And he was like, he could trace his back to like, when I play this game is
Mhm.
when these sinful thoughts and feelings get triggered. So like, get rid of that game, or like like sort of yeah, dig into it a little bit more.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So another question about smartphone. Like, number 5. How do I help my child when he or she is so engrossed in a game that he or she cannot let go of the smartphone? I think it is a similar question, but
Yeah.
how do you advise to them?
I think too, it depends how old your child is.
Mhm,
If you have a young child,
mhm.
4 years old, you could just gently take that away,
Uh,
or wait till they were done and then just realize, oh, she's not old enough to be able to handle this well. We're just not going to give it back to her.
mhm,
Um, if they're older, you could maybe wait till they were done and then have a conversation about it. Here's another interesting thing I want to make sure that you know. Um, Girls are a lot able, when I talk to girls, especially if they're girls in college, they can tell me what they don't like about social media and how it's affecting them.
mhm,
Girls are more introspective. They're more able to look inside themselves and kind of figure out what they're feeling and why.
mhm,
Boys have a lot harder time with that.
mhm,
When I talk to boys, even in college, even boys who are playing for 15 hours a day,
mhm,
they can't tell me that they're addicted. They can't
mhm,
they're just like this is just fun. I just like doing this. And so it's if you're it will be a lot more fruitful to open up a conversation
Mhm.
with your older daughter and
Mhm.
ask her what she's feeling and ask her to weigh in on this and ask her what she doesn't like about it and what she wants her social media life to look at. And for boys,
Mhm.
I think you just have to be their muscles for them and you just have
Oh.
to say, no, we're not doing this. You're not, sorry, you're
Mhm.
not old enough to have the conversation. You're
Mhm.
not seeing this in yourself. I'm your
Mhm.
mom. You're just done.
And I think that there should be a father's job. Like,
Yes,
no, you dare not.
it should be a father's job.
Yeah, that's right. And one more interesting, in my experience, I have 4 year old son, and uh, about a year ago, we just took television took off from my living room, and
Yeah.
before taking that off, my son really asked to watch some kind of cartoon show and some kind of things. But after I took it, and then no more TV, no more TV, and then he began to read books, and um, he reads so many books in a day. So and he asks us to read books for him, and I think it is really important when the child is younger. You
Yeah.
can handle their environment. So yeah.
You know what? I mean, that's sort of the same story as mine. Like, it was hard,
Mhm.
even to give him a little bit was harder than to give him none. Like when we
Mm.
said no,
Mhm.
don't ask. I mean, you can ask, but we're not, the answer is always no. Then
Mhm.
he quit asking and did
Mhm.
other things.
Mhm.
But when he asked and we would say, okay, a small amount, then
Mhm.
he thought about that a lot and he talked about it a lot and it was just like the only thing he could think about. And so for us, it was harder to give him a little bit of game
Mhm.
than to give him nothing at all. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that's true for every kid, but I think that's worth thinking about.
It's more easier way to deal with boys.
Yes, it seems like an easier way to deal with boys. Yeah.
Because they don't cry.
If they do something, yeah, then they find something, they stop
Yeah.
thinking about it all the time. If they
Uh,
can't do it at all, then they stop
mhm.
thinking about it.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. The parenting wisdom, and thank you. Thank you so much. And today the slides and the your explanations, there are so many insights, and then even we didn't know that we didn't really expect that much suicidal the symptoms
Yeah, scary.
girls experiencing. That's so sad. And we need to pray, and then we need to have the wisdom. Yeah, right. Thank you so much. Thank
Oh,
you,
thank you.
Sarah.
You. Thank you so much. I hope some of it was helpful. Pray about it. If it wasn't helpful, ignore it. Um, yeah.
Was it helpful and very edifying? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this time. And you can see all the heart buttons on
I
there,
can see
right?
the
Like
hearts. Thank you,
emojis.
everybody.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you.
all those emojis are for you.
Or they're for you. Maybe they're for you.
No, definitely for you. Okay. Okay, Sarah, really appreciate it. And
Okay.
hopefully we can have next maybe next year or next time we can have a precious time again like this, with different topic, like a gospel bound or some kind of other books you have
Yeah,
written or edited. All right, thank you
that
so
would be
much,
great. Thank you. Have a
Sarah.
good night, everybody.
Have a good day. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. 예, 오늘 이렇게 두 번째 세션 우리 세라 자일스트라 강사님께서 우리 섬겨주셨습니다. 우리 TGC 이 수석 작가로 섬기시는 분이죠. 이 소셜 세니티 인은 인스타 월드라는 책, 그러니까 인스타 세상에서의 사회적인 어떤 뭐 제정신 뭐 이렇게 표현하면
지금
이상하겠네.
쌤
사회적인
목사님께서 원본 오디오에 계시면 딴 분들이 안 들리는 거 아닌가 싶은데요. 혹시 다 들리시나요? 아니면 통역
한국어
라인으로 오셔야 다
한국어로
들릴
한국어로
수도
갈까요?
있습니다.
한국어로 갈까요? 들리십니까? 들리면 다 잘 들리면 다 이게 엄지해 주세요. 잘 들리면 예, 잘 들리는 것 같습니다. 네, 네, 감사합니다. 네, 감사합니다. 네, 그래서 이 책에서 진짜 좋은 내용들을 많이 다뤄요. 많이 다루고 어, 우리 제가 딱 한 10분 이내로 다 마무리하겠습니다. 우리 성경 한 군데만 좀 찾겠습니다. 잠언, 잠언 9장, 잠언 9장, 성경 잠언 9장입니다. 제가 방금 말씀드린 그 책의 한 챕터에 나오는 부분인데, 제가 굉장히 이제 은혜롭게 오늘 읽고, 우리 오늘 이 세션에서 좀 나눴으면 좋겠다. 물론 이제 우리 세라 절스라 이 강사님은 전체적인 부분, 굉장히 많은 광범위한 내용들, SNS라든지 비디오 게임, 그러니까 스마트폰 게임이라든지 이런 부분들의 스크린 사용에 대해서 이게 여러 부분을 다루다 보니까 시간이 촉박하신 것 같은데 이분이 편집하신 책에 이 잠언 9장에 대한 내용이 잘 실려 있어요. 잠언 9장을 제가 좀 빨리 읽겠습니다. 지혜가 그 집을 짓고 일곱 기둥을 다듬고 짐승을 잡으며 포도주를 혼합하여 상을 갖추고 그 요종을 보내요. 성중 높은 곳에서 불러 이르기를 무릇 어리석은 자는 이리로 돌이키라. 또 지혜 없는 자에게 이르기를 너는 와서 내 식물을 먹으며 내 혼합한 포도주를 마시고 어리석음을 버리고 생명을 얻으라. 명철의 길을 행하라 하느니라. 거만한 자를 징계하는 자는 도리어 능욕을 받고 악인을 책망하는 자는 도리어 흠을 잡히느니라. 거만한 자를 책망하지 말라. 그가 너를 미워할까 두려우니라. 지혜 있는 자를 책망하라. 그가 너를 사랑하리라. 지혜 있는 자에게 교훈을 더하라. 그가 더욱 지혜로워질 것이요 의로운 사람을 가르치라. 그의 학식이 더하리라. 여호와를 경외하는 것이 지혜의 근본이요 거룩하신 자를 아는 것이 명철이니라. 나 지혜로 말미암아 네 날이 많아질 것이요 내 생명의 해가 더하리라. 내가 만일 지혜로우면 그 지혜가 내게 유익할 것이나 내가 만일 거만하면 너 홀로 해를 당하리라. 미련한 계집이 떠들며 어리석어서 아무것도 알지 못하고 자기 지문에 앉으며 성읍 높은 곳에 있는 자리에 앉아서 자기 길을 바로 가는 행객을 불러 이르되 무릇 어리석은 자는 이리로 돌이키라. 또 지혜 없는 자에게 이르기를 도적질한 물이 달고 몰래 먹는 떡이 맛이 있다 하는도다. 오직 그 어리석은 자는 죽은 자가 그의 곳에 있는 것과 그의 깃들이 음부 깊은 곳에 있는 것을 알지 못하느니라. 아멘. 여기서 이제 대조되는 게 바로 9장 1절 지혜. 우리가 이제 히브리에서 지혜라고 하는 거는 여성 명사죠. 그러니까 지혜로운 여인 이렇게도 이제 표현될 수 있습니다. 그리고 13절에 미련한 계집. 그러니까 지혜로운 여인과 미련한 계집이 대조가 되고 있어요. 이 전체 구조가 이렇게 이루어져 있죠. 그런데 제가 읽은 그 책, 오늘 세라 잘스라 이분이 편집하신 그 책에는 이것이 바로 소셜 미디어, 우리가 SNS나 인터넷에서 만나게 되는 지혜와 미련함. 한편으로 지혜로운 게 있죠. 우리가 이 SNS를 통해서 저도 인스타그램을 통해서 우리 뭐 중요한 신학 박사님들이나 또는 전도하시는 분들 또 세계적인 리더들 이런 분들하고 소통합니다. 그래서 저는 페이스북이나 인스타그램 이걸 통해서 굉장히 소통을 많이 하기 때문에 굉장히 유익한 걸 많이 얻기도 하고 또 유익한 걸 전달하기도 하죠. 그런 부분이 있는가 하면 또 중독의 문제, 또 우리가 빠질 수 있는 죄악들의 문제 이런 것들이 있다는 것입니다. 그런데 두 가지 컨텐츠가 나돌아 다닌다는 거예요. 지혜로운 컨텐츠도 있지만 또 미련한 컨텐츠도 있다는 겁니다. 어, 지혜가 일곱 기둥을 다듬고 쭉쭉 이렇게 이제 내용들을 준비해서 4절을 보시면 어리석은 자에게 이리로 돌이키라라고 얘기를 합니다. 그리고 16절에도 보시면 어리석은 자는 이리로 돌이키라. 그러니까 뭐냐면 주의를 집중시킨다는 거예요. 지혜도 나한테 집중해라고 얘기를 하고 미련한 계집, 미련함도 어리석은 자야 나를 봐라고 얘기를 한다는 거예요. 그리고 우리의 주의를 집중시키려고 하는 두 가지 다른 대상들이 있다. 선함이 있고 지혜가 있고 또 한편으로 미련함이 있고 이런 것을 우리가 분별할 줄 알아야 된다. 지혜는 어떻게 해야 합니까? 6절을 보시면 어리석음을 버리고 생명을 얻어라. 그리고 명철의 길을 행하라. 그러면서 이 지혜는 거만한 자나 또 이렇게 학식이 없는 자, 우리가 8절, 9절에 보시면 거만한 자나 지혜가 없는 자에게 이러한 지혜는 유익이 되지 못해요. 음. 굉장히 이 어떤 하나님의 예정 그리고 주권 이거를 이제 내포한 말씀이죠. 그러나 미련한 지혜는 어떤 걸 가르칩니까? 바로 17절, 18절이죠. 야, 도둑질하고 몰래 먹는 거. 야, 네 스크린 아무도 못 보잖아. 그러니까 몰래 들어가 보는 거. 그리고 무언가 훔쳐보는 거. 이런 게 재밌는 거야. 그러면서 이제 어리석은 자가 자기가 그 죽을 짓을 하고 있는 거. 그리고 음부 깊은 곳에 미련한 짓을 하고 있는 걸 그 자가 전혀 모르도록 마비를 시킨다. 그런 측면입니다. 그래서 한편으로 지혜가 이 미련한 자야 나를 봐라 그리고 깨달아라 이렇게 얘기를 하고 있는가 하면 또 미련한 계집이 이렇게 어리석은 자의 이 여기를 봐라 그러면서 유혹하는 그러한 모습이 있다는 거죠. 그런데 이 두 가지 서로 다른 컨텐츠 우리가 하나님이 우리를 사회적인 존재로 소셜한 existence 존재로 지으셨다고 했죠. 소셜 빙으로 지으셨는데 그래서 우리는 SNS나 이런 인터넷이 생기기 전에도 사회적인 존재들이에요. 예, 예. 그런데 우리가 지혜를 따라갈 거냐, 아니면 미련함을 따라갈 거냐의 그 한 중간에 바로 지혜를 택할 수 있는 그 비결이 들어있는데 그게 10절입니다. 10절 뭐라고 나와 있죠? 여호와를 경외하는 것이 지혜의 근본이다. 거룩하신 자를 아는 것이 명철이다. 그래서 하나님을 경외함을 우리가 갖추게 되면 미련한 자의 음성을 따라가지 않고 지혜로운 자의 음성을 따라갈 수가 있다는 거예요. 그래서 아까 강의 중에도 나왔지만 하나님은 전지전능하신데 우리가 마치 이 소셜 미디어, SNS나 인터넷이 또 특히나 요즘에 나오는 챗 GPT나 인공지능이나 이런 것들이 우리가 무언가 검색하면 우리는 모든 걸 알 수 있는 것처럼 그렇게 우리를 착각하게 만듭니다. 그런데 우리가 그런 것에 절제를 가지고 또 우리는 항상 있는 존재가 아닌데 우리는 무언가 항상 우리가 존재하고 24시간 우리가 소통할 수 있는 것처럼 그렇게 착각하죠. 그러나 우리는 매일 잠을 자야 되는 유한한 존재잖아요. 그래서 우리가 하나님과 같이 되려고 하는 그러한 것을 내려놓고 부족한 부분을 또는 우리가 SNS를 보다 지혜롭게 사용하기 위해서 철저히 피조물의 자리에서 또 함께 하는 그와 같은 모습들을 가지고 뭐 유아 독존하는 그러한 형태의 이 SNS 사용이 아니라 그래서 그 소셜 세니티 그 책의 제일 마지막에 보면 이 SNS 공간을 마치 자신의 집 거실처럼 그렇게 여겨라. 그래서 자기를 막 뽐내려고 하는 그런 것도 하지 말고 그냥 사람들을 정중히 초대하고 그리고 이 인터넷 세계에서도 예의와 그런 것을 현실처럼 갖추고 서로 소통하고 그렇게 하는 자세가 이제 필요하다. 뭔가 나만의 이상 세계를 만들려고 하는 것이 아니라 내게 주어져 있는 현실을 중심에다 놓고 하나님이 주신 현실을 중심에다 놓고 살아가는 그러면서 하나님의 통치 아래 경외하면서 이 모든 것들을 선하게 사용하는 그러한 지혜가 필요하다. 그 부분을 우리가 볼 수 있습니다. 그래서 잠언 9장 여기 보시면 한편으로 지혜가 외치고 있어요. 세상 지혜가 하나님 주신 지혜가 있어요. 오늘 강의에서도 놀이 좋은 부분이 분명히 있어요. 우리가 뭐 농구 경기를 한다, 뭐 축구 경기를 한다, 같이 이렇게 운동을 같이 하는 이런 걸 통해서 굉장히 사회성이 높아지지 않습니까? 그러니까 놀이라고 하는 것, 또 창의적인 놀이 이런 걸 통해서 분명히 하나님이 우리에게 두고 계신 선하신 뜻이 있습니다. 그런데 이게 또 이러한 놀이가 타락할 수 있고 무절제한 중독으로 갈 수 있고 그런 점이 있음을 균형 잡히게 오늘 말씀해 주시고 있죠. 그래서 SNS도 마찬가지고 심지어 게임의 영역도 마찬가지다. 어떤 부분에 있어서는 이게 굉장히 이 빠른 손과 눈의 협응 이런 것들에 영향을 주지만 이게 대부분 우리가 현실에서의 어떤 이 역량에는 악영향을 끼치기 때문에 어, 이 게임의 현실이 게임의 세상이 현실에 그대로 재현되지는 않잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 그런 부분을 우리가 현실을 자각하는 속에 항상 있도록 해줘야 된다. 그런 이제 얘기를 했습니다. 제가 어릴 때만 하더라도 우리 같이 모여서 게임하고 그랬거든요. 같이 모여서 친구들 같이 모여서 근데 이게 같이 모이는 것이 없어져 완전 사회성을 이탈한 사회성을 벗어나 버린 그와 같은 고립된 속에서 자기만의 세계 속에 들어가고 그리고 자기만의 세계를 완전히 구축해 버리는 이와 같은 것은 우리가 하나님을 경외하는 게 아니죠. 하나님께서는 우리를 이 세상 가운데 지으셨고 그리고 우리가 죄 가운데서 죄의 대속자이신 그리스도를 만나도록 하셨고 그리고 우리가 이 세상을 살아가는 동안에 우리의 이웃들을 주셔서 돌아보고 그리고 그들 가운데 구원할 자들을 구원하는 일에 우리가 쓰임 받도록 그렇게 해주셨다는 사실입니다. 이 잠언 9장을 SNS에 빗대어서 설명하는 걸 보고 제가 참 정말 성경과 현실 그리고 본문과 현장 이런 부분을 굉장히 균형 잡히게 보고 있구나 그런 예, 감동도 받고 또 도전도 받는 그런 시간이었습니다. 아까 질문에서 한 가지 하자면 나이가 어릴 때는 그냥 세팅 자체를 유해한 세팅을 없애도 괜찮다. 그런데 나이가 어느 정도 들어가면 본인에게 어떤 이해하는 과정, 그리고 특히 그런 어떤 스마트폰 중독이나 이런 부분들 다른 것으로 대체해 줄 수 있는, 그러니까 조금 더 좋은 습관을 기를 수 있는 것으로 좀 대체시켜 줄 수 있는 그러한 어, 이 부분이 필요하다. 이런 좀 실천적인 지혜들, 특히 자녀를 두고 계신 남자아이나 여자아이 또 청소년 이렇게 두고 계신 분들에게 오늘 여러 가지 인사이트가 있었을 거라 생각합니다. 오늘 강의의 전체 내용은 우리 카톡방 그 슬라이드에 강의 노트가 다 요약이 되어 있습니다. 그래서 강의 중에 그걸 함께 보신 분들은 아마 강의 내용을 따라오기가 쉬우셨을 거고 혹시 그걸 못 보신 분들은 오늘 이걸 마치고 나서 다시금 보시면은 좋겠습니다. 세션 2를 마치면 지금 밤 10시 50분입니다만은 우리가 바로 이 강의를 듣고 난 다음에 하는 게 가장 좋거든요. 그래서 리뷰 작성하실 수 있습니다. 그래서 리뷰를 꼭 모두 좀 작성해 주십시오. 그래서 거기에서 좀 잘 나온 리뷰들을 우리 세라 자일스트라 강사님에게 또 보내드리고 또 이렇게 이런 어떤 은혜를 받았다. 이런 어떤 그 통찰을 얻었다 이런 것을 또 피드백을 보내드리려고 합니다. 그래서 이 시간 마치면 곧바로 피드백 그 리뷰를 좀 작성을 모두들 해주십시오. 길게 걸리지 않습니다. 짧게 하시면 됩니다. 네. 제가 기도하고 오늘 두 번째 세션 마치겠습니다. 다음 주는 우리 웨스트민스터 문서들에 나타난 표준 문서들에 나타난 그리스도인의 삶에 대해서 우리 존 락신 목사님 미국 에딘버러 대학에서 지금 박사과정 중이시죠. 저하고 우리 폼대에서 같이 공부했던 동기 목사님이신데 다음 주에 그렇게 섬겨 주실 겁니다. 저도 참 기대가 되고 유익한 시간이 될 것 같습니다. 제가 기도하고 오늘 순서를 마치겠습니다. 하나님 아버지 감사합니다. 우리를 사회적인 존재로, 그래서 하나님과 교통할 수 있는 존재로, 말씀을 듣고 기도를 아뢰 수 있는 존재로 지어주신 주님 감사드립니다. 우리가 서로 소통하고 서로 교제하는 가운데 그것이 자칫 하나님의 자리를 넘보는 것이 되지 않도록 각별한 주의가 있게 하여 주시옵소서. 하나님 아버지, 주님께서 우리를 놓아두신 바로 이 자리, 주님께서 우리를 놓아두신 바로 이 현실 속에서 우리가 하나님과 이웃과 아름다운 관계를 세워나가는 그러한 우리가 되게 하여 주시옵시고, 특별히 중독이나 고립으로 인해서, 우울감으로 인해서, 비교나 여러 가지 죄악된 것으로 인해서 억눌려 있고 고통 중에 있는, 죄악 중에 있는 그러한 자들을 주여 돌이키는 우리가 될 수 있도록 역사하여 주시옵소서. 우리에게 지혜를 더하여 주셔서 정말 자녀들을, 특히 우리 후대들을 이러한 유혹의 시대와 이러한 분별력이 너무나 필요한 이러한 시대에 미련한 계집의 말을 따라가지 않고 지혜의 외침을 들을 수 있는 아이들로, 후대들로 기를 수 있는 힘을 우리에게 더하여 주시옵소서. 예수님의 이름으로 기도드리옵나이다. 아멘.